was a young man, I learned to love a place called Algonquin. To know the touch of a paddle and the feel of a canoe under me. To know that 2,000 lakes were out there, all woven together by countless rivers and streams. Follow us now as we explore the art of wildlife photographers in Ontario's rugged Algonquin Park. In all of this world, wherever you go, wilderness country is diminishing. But just a 3-hour drive from one of the world's fastest growing cities, Toronto, you can find space to put those paddling muscles in shape. Algonquin Park. Not just a few acres of wilderness, almost 2 million acres, about 3,000 square miles. The park, a sanctuary for wildlife, is a natural laboratory for students and scientists, an outdoor studio for painters and for photographers like John and Janet Foster, who specialize in the Canadian wilderness. John and Janet have taken dozens of memorable canoe trips through Algonquin. How memorable can you get? Part of their honeymoon was spent here.
Something happened on that occasion which we've never forgotten. A single timber wolf walked slowly through our camp up on the Crow River. We just felt honored.
Algonquin is a kind of a miracle, for somehow this great piece of the Canadian shield is still surviving against all the pressures of civilization.
On this occasion, we were planning to rendezvous with 2 other photographers, Walter and Myrna Burlett from Michigan. They're 2 of North America's leading wildlife filmmakers, but they had never photographed Algonquin's wildlife, already emerging along this route.
A rhythmic croak to our ears, but to the great blue heron, it is clearly the romantic sound of dinner music. Red-winged blackbirds are quickly distressed by intruders in their territory. Even with a full beak, the female can find words to let you know whose marsh this is. Indians followed these water routes as long as 6,000 years ago. Many rivers and streams rise here, clear and clean and pure. And in those streams, beaver, strong and healthy, easy to find in the evening light. A northern lake and a strange, tremulous tune, the wilderness cry of a friend, the loon. Experienced naturalists know they shouldn't get too close to the nest. In spring, it nests on Canadian lakes from Algonquin Park to the Bering Straits, from Newfoundland up to Alaska, Hudson's Bay to Lake Athabasca. True, it nests, but the survival rate of the young is studied with some alarm. Eggshells seem to be getting thinner, a result of insecticide residues in the loon's fish diet. But people are another hazard. We get too close, and we make too much noise. The wash from a careless motorboat can swamp a nest. Those precious eggs are just inches above water level. Graceful on and under the water, or in the air, but awkward on land. Over 200 species of birds have been seen in Algonquin Park, and probably a wider variety of warblers than anywhere in the world. This is the yellowthroat. You may think you're walking unseen through the woods, but at least one pair of eyes will likely be watching. In this case, the ruffed grouse.
Knowing that wildlife is near is part of the thrill of Algonquin. We walk in expectation along every trail here. Well, for example, we know that somewhere out there are about 150 timber wolves.
And if you walk with care, you can sometimes find nesting birds, like this common snipe. Most of the park's predators, like the timber wolf and the red fox, hunt silently, away from human eyes. Here was a moment that we'll never duplicate. I was filming Janet in the sunset when 6 mergansers popped up in the frame. You could wait a lifetime for a shot like that. And early morning mist, that's our favorite time. We told Walter and Myrna Burlett that ideally they should see Algonquin through all seasons, and perhaps photograph such remarkable sights as the ruffed grouse beating his cupped wings. This is a spring ritual that he sometimes performs as late as October.
Wild country, beauty and life that draws naturalists and nature photographers for thousands of miles. A meeting of 2 husband and wife teams, and for Walter and Myrna Burlett, a first look at Algonquin Park, but not their first trip into wilderness country. Together, they have seen some of North America's and the world's greatest wilderness areas.
We've always had the feeling we could spend probably the rest of our lives exploring and photographing just in the northern Canadian wilderness. What are your favorite places in North America? Where have you been?
Oh, I think Alaska probably is one of the most favorite spots of mine. They have so many birds there, particularly in the nesting period. But the caribou, the big Alaskan brown bear, the Alaskan grizzly are just a few of the fascinating animals of the Alaskan area.
We saw an abundance.
It was John and Janet's admiration for Walter Burlett's films that brought the 4 of them together in Algonquin. The park's rough and rolling terrain and concentration of wild creatures offers an ideal setting for the Burlett's revealing cameras. Cameras that on past trips have focused on a wide array of exotic animals and locations far from Algonquin.
Between them, they have shot more than 750,000 feet of film. Their purpose is to bring these films to as many people as possible, and their theme is saving wildlife. As Myrna says, if people see and understand wildlife, they'll care about it.
And there are few film teams that are so well matched. For Walter is an artist, a perfectionist. He's patient and skillful with his camera. And Myrna is a trained biologist and teacher.
On his wildlife lecture circuit, Walter depends heavily on her knowledge of wildlife ecology. And then in her college classrooms, Myrna makes extensive use of his film footage. And this, of course, brings life to her lectures.
And so they seek out the wildlife on remote seacoasts, windswept beaches, on seldom visited islands that swarm with seabirds, where a wildlife photographer can be happily marooned for days. And even on African plains, with Mount Kilimanjaro as a splendid background. Comradeship, here again, a working partnership that can mean the difference between a successful expedition and disappointment. Yet even the greatest creatures of the tropics are no more fascinating to them than the tiniest wild animal or plant in Algonquin Park. A fact made clear that first night in a rainstorm. There's beauty in rain, beauty that sometimes only a camera can isolate.
Well, I got the close-up lens on. I think we'll start right here.
All right.
Light.
Ready?
Yeah. Here we go.
Boy, it's lucky we put up this tarp the way it's coming down.
Well, it sure protects the camera. Most of the time when you look at these things, they don't look fresh enough. But oh boy, that's really nice. And it really highlights so beautifully.
And the light's picking up the wet surface. It's glistening. Beautiful.
Well, rain makes some of the campers unhappy, but it certainly isn't bad when you're photographing, when you're trying to get something real different. And you can bring out the real art and nature photography, you know, you have to sacrifice something.
Can you actually get drops splattering on that?
Yeah, I think I can, yeah.
Algonquin's lakes and hills were chiseled out of Precambrian rock by immense glaciers that moved across the land over 10,000 years ago, pushing all of its topsoil hundreds of miles to the south. Today's rivers, streams, and lakes follow the contours left by this ice age. And these are the routes that you travel in your canoe. Some are easy, but if you're fit, the most difficult routes are the most rewarding. The trend towards equality of the sexes is welcomed over portages. And while the males usually get stuck with the canoes, there's a good reason for this. They're heavy.
we got?
It's a myrtle warbler.
Myrtle?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. I think there's 15 or maybe 20 different species of warbler in the park.
That many.
Here's something real interesting in nature. A aphid colony. All those fine little dots on there are aphids, and they're maintained or supported by ants. And the ants milk the aphids.
How does the ant milk an aphid?
Well, actually, they secrete a fine little honeydew, and they pick that up with the... Right here, you can see the little parts right there where they pick it up.
I see.
And of course, they do damage a plant. You can see how these leaves are smaller and sort of eaten in spots. The aphids, they sap the nourishment from this stem here, and that way they get honeydew, and the ants, of course, like that honeydew a great deal.
The Burletts do some close-up photography in the field, but for extreme close-ups, for serious study, they use their laboratory. Here, in the Burletts' lab, the eye of the photographer gives way to the eye of the scientist. Tiny larval form of aquatic life, magnified 150 times. An interesting way to include extreme close-ups in an outdoor film.
Time for rest?
Looks that way. How far is it?
Oh,
The next portage.
it's always further than you think, Walter.
What do you like the best, the canvas-covered canoes or the metal canoes?
I've always liked the canvas and cedar because, well, for aesthetic reasons, it feels nice. And they look pretty good. Yeah, you've got to carry them. I like them. You know, they're probably the closest thing you can get to the old original birch bark. Not too many places you can see them anymore either. The art of building birch bark canoes is all but lost. Percy Commanda is one of the few Indian craftsmen to preserve this skill. He uses no nails, no metal of any kind in his canoes. And the bark goes on in one piece, but it's turned inside out.
They look similar now to the
Percy says that in 3,000 years, there have been virtually no changes in these techniques.
saw marks or anything on them.
He uses simple tools, an awl, a crooked knife, a hammer.
Is there an angle, a certain angle?
His ancestors used tools made of stone and knives that were shaped from bone.
I see.
He steams the ribs in order to bend them into place under the gunnels. And the gunnels themselves are lashed on with spruce roots. They shrink and harden into firm bindings. Before he launches this canoe, he'll cover the seams with a mixture of spruce gum and bear grease.
How much is the canoe going to weigh?
It'll weigh about 25 to 27 pounds.
How long does it take to build a canoe?
300 hours to build a canoe.
How much weight will a canoe carry?
Canoe will carry 1 man and a moose.
1 man and a moose? You'd better have a good look at a bull moose. And then perhaps a few lessons from an expert, Omer Stringer, who demonstrates the techniques of handling a canoe every day during the summer at a public campsite in Algonquin. How well I remember Omer Stringer, an old friend. Watching him handle that canoe takes me back to before I even started my career in Canada. Omer and I worked together at the same summer camp as camp counselors. That was, some years ago. He's one of the best-known guides in Algonquin and internationally recognized as one of the world's top canoeists. If you're serious about exploring the park, handling a canoe is a skill that's vital. Even a casual tripper should learn the basics.
Swept out, the hand comes up the paddle shaft to give you a little bit of distance, and you start there in a semicircle. Don't draw it back too far so that you get a lot of turbulence into the canoe. Simply short arc, and the canoe will turn right where you're sitting. The canoe comes around, you have tremendous action using a long shaft on your hand and reaching out. That's called the sweep stroke and is used to turn away from the side that you're paddling on. Turning to the side that you are paddling on, we will always work rather than back up, as most beginners would do, to turn this way. We work on the light end of the canoe and we use what we call an inside draw turn. Paddle goes that. The face of the paddle draws water towards the front of the canoe. Be careful not to draw it towards you, but towards the front of the canoe. When you get down to there, the paddle drops, continues a C motion right around and gets you that turn. It's then feathered out again and drawn. I'll go right around now. See the action of the canoe.
The lesson includes what not to do, especially while you're shooting the rapids. How do you rescue a capsized canoeist? And how do you right the canoe and send him on his way? That's a neat trick, particularly if you're inexperienced. Watch this. It's worth remembering. Demonstration of skill and safety. But it's the park's interior that draws the serious canoeist. Out there, among those 2,000 lakes. Out there, among the wildlife. Traveling into the park wilderness is an advantage for the serious wildlife photographer. As you go deeper into the park, the rewards become more evident. Echoes of civilization begin to die away. And if you've ever felt like getting lost for a few days, well, if you don't have a map, it can actually happen here. In almost every marsh and stream, you'll hear the gentle murmur of water trickling past a beaver dam. Some of their dams are 7 or 8 feet high.
Beaver are plentiful here, and Walter was lucky. It's not often you find them working in broad daylight. If you've ever wondered where they get that reputation for hard work, watch now as one of nature's finest engineers plugs a leak in his dam.
Beavers have built dams that flooded out railways. One railway worker used his pickaxe to pull apart a beaver dam. And then one night, the axe vanished. And just by watching this beaver at work, you can guess what happened to that axe handle. And the axe head was found at the very bottom of the dam's foundation. A pose reminiscent of a miniature prehistoric monster. Its mission is simply to leave a scent on this mud hill to mark its territory.
Wildlife photography has become very popular in the last few years. But you must learn when to withdraw, when to keep your distance, and you should try not to crowd an animal in its own territory. The loons are very sensitive in this regard.
Two eggs are hatched, and the young can decide when they get tired to go for a ride. It's not impossible to run into other nature photographers, no matter how remote the location. Dan Gibson, who has specialized in Algonquin Park photography, was trying a new technique for filming loons. Instead of the photographer going to the loon, this method, using a decoy placed within the loon's territory, brings the loon to the photographer.
Walter, he's going to come in a little closer. Now, what I'll do is play his territorial call to him. Now, just hold fire just a minute now. I see he's coming now. Just hold fire. Look, that's good. Look at that. That's good. Perfect. Good. He's coming closer. He's gonna die. Just hold. That's it. Okay, now look. Just hold fire. Now just put this back a wee bit. And as soon as he comes up, Walter, I'll fire again. Okay? There he is now. Hang on. Now watch. Good. 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 Very good.
Beautiful, beautiful. Nice.
That's it. Oh, yeah. Just nice profile. Beautiful profile. You won't get it better than that, Walter. That camera's empty. Is it? Oh, that's a good 100 feet.
Dan led the party to a hidden lake, one of his favorite locations beyond the Beaver Dam. Here again, the environment is influenced by the beaver's work. Pond life that thrives behind the dam, minnows, frogs, snakes, birds, all attract the great blue heron.
Great blue herons often choose high treetops as a nest site. The males gather sticks, and then the females work the sticks into place. They have incredible eyesight, and they're very shy. You really can't get too close, and you need a long lens. Again, the photographer should take great care not to frighten them away from their young for long periods, because young birds require constant attention and feeding.
Remember those old pirate films? This was called walking the plank. Here was a classic situation that Dan Gibson had noticed earlier. A messy campsite with food and utensils carelessly abandoned for a few hours. The favorite sort of campsite for roving bears. The bears don't mind a bit, and they'll keep coming back until the camper discovers that someone has been eating his porridge. But don't blame the bear. He's just following one delicious smell after another. Lookouts are posted everywhere. too much camera noise, and the party is over.
Myrna Burlett developed a love for animals as a child. She grew up alone on a farm, and she had to find her friends among the farm animals. She says that she knew she was going to be a biologist when she was in the 8th grade. And if you think this Algonquin chipmunk has taken to Myrna, it's really an old story with the Burletts. Affinity with animals is part of their life. Their home in Michigan has become a kind of wildlife refuge. Orphaned and sick creatures are frequently brought in here by neighbors. An orphaned fox. It was confused and frightened at first, but it's really quite happy now. And a highly independent raccoon with affection for the Burletts and sharp teeth for strangers.
About half a day's drive from Walter and Myrna Burlett's house is the rarest sort of outdoor classroom. Here, in this small area of northern Michigan, just south of the Canadian border, Myrna's class studies the behavior of one of nature's eccentrics, the Kirtland's warbler. About 200 pairs are left on this earth. All of them nest here each spring. Their nesting requirements are extremely specialized. The existence of this species depends on fire burning up areas of forest and the regeneration of jack pine that follows. When the jack pine grow 5 to 18 feet high, a small band of Kirtland's warblers moves in to nest. No other habitat will do. A precarious lifestyle. Its survival linked to fire. A few days in wild surroundings, and no matter who you are or what you are, photographer, naturalist, or just traveler, you rediscover two senses, your eyesight, and your emotions.
John, do you get a lot of painters in this area?
Well, I guess it all began with a group of 7. When was that? Back in the 20s, Jenna? Mm-hmm. And they saw the Canadian wilderness in several different ways, often in an abstract way, often in a very literal way. I think what you do with your movie camera in a wilderness scene and what we try to do with our still cameras is all a form of wilderness expression.
It was Tom Thompson who inspired the group of 7. He was an Algonquin guide and painter, and these North Woods were in his blood. But Thompson's work has also been an inspiration to many other artists, like Jack Eastaugh.
You know, this is pretty typical of the kind of scenery that Thompson must have been able to introduce his artist friends to. Tom Thompson and the group, you know, were not popular at first. People were not used to their style of painting. Nowadays, we certainly wouldn't call them abstract or way out or anything. They were called the hot mush school because they used to use pigment straight from the brush. They'd put great globs of pigment on, and I think this country demands it. These men interpreted the North Country Algonquin Park as they saw it. It called for strength, it called for realism, and they found it in the tubes of their paint, and they put it on the board and they let it stand as a statement. We know now, of course, that they were right, because we've come to appreciate that what they had to say really does exist. And I think this is why I paint in this kind of setting. I think this is what I have found inspirational, if you like, about the work of Tom Thompson and the group of 7. You just can't paint in this kind of country and live in this kind of country without being caught up in the magic of it all. There's a feeling, and art, after all, is an expression of feeling.
It's harder these days to separate yourself from the crowd. We search for personal identity, try to be individuals, but how rarely are we satisfied. And yet for some, like Jack Eastaugh, the answers are all here, among the pine trees and portages, the streams and marshes, and the jumble of Precambrian rock.
If you have a photographic eye or a skill with a brush, you can take pieces of it home with you, or you can simply look and remember, and bring back these images in your memory.
When you begin to recognize the subtleties of mood and feeling of the woods, suddenly you have interesting company. Paints and brushes, or camera and film, or just your eyes. one thing more, a canoe, a silent friend. You can travel in it. You can work from it. You can explore the shoreline for the most interesting angles. For another kind of mood, you can drift into the golden fire of a morning mist. Wilderness cannot grow. It can only diminish. Millions of people live near Algonquin. Yet those hills and streams and rocky shorelines, those same landscapes that inspire painters, photographers, and travelers who come here with pack and paddle, they're still here. Algonquin, a sanctuary for those who know it well. A quiet place that somehow survives at the very edge of our cities. Refuge for wildlife and grateful man.